Chapter 1. The Unexpected Encounter. The spaceship hummed softly as it glided through the vast expanse of space, its engines a quiet lull that contrasted sharply with the turbulence swirling within Marla's mind. As a princess of Zygra, a planet light-years away from Earth, she had been raised to handle the pressures of leadership, diplomacy, and the weight of her people's survival. But nothing, not even the countless hours of training and preparation, could have prepared her for the overwhelming decision she was now forced to make. She stood alone in the observation deck, staring out at the endless ocean of stars that surrounded the ship. The bright points of light glittered like diamonds against the infinite black, and for a moment, she allowed herself to be lost in the beauty of it all. But the stars no longer offered her solace. She had heard about Earth, this strange, primitive planet with its blue oceans and vast landscapes of wilderness. A place where humans lived, thrived, and were, in some inexplicable way, both vastly different and eerily similar to her own species. And now, as she drifted closer to this distant world, she couldn't help but feel the weight of the mission she had been tasked with. The fate of her people rested on the strange genetic requirements of a human individual she had never met, someone who was both an alien and yet, to her, more crucial than anyone she had ever known. The disease ravaging Zygra had spread for years, killing countless citizens and threatening the very foundation of her planet. Despite their advanced technology and knowledge of the stars, they had failed to find a cure. The disease, a strange, parasitic organism that attacked the immune systems of all but the royal family, had taken its toll on the population, and no medical breakthrough had been able to stop it. That's when the solution had been discovered in ancient legend from the farthest reaches of Zygra's history, a story passed down through generations that told of a way to cure the disease, not through science or technology, but through something far more primal. The legend spoke of the need for an alien's blood, a cross-species union between the royal bloodline of Zygra and a human from Earth. It was said that through the mingling of their genetic material, Zygra's people would be granted immunity to the disease, and it would cease to plague their world. The biological need for a human partner, something that had been dismissed as myth for centuries, was now the only option left. And so, with no other alternative, Marla had been chosen to make the sacrifice, an alien princess sent to breed with a human. The thought made her stomach turn. It wasn't the idea of mating with an earthling that repulsed her, it was the realization of how far she had fallen from the high ideals of her planet's people. Zygra's ancient legends were meant to remain stories, passed on by the elders, told around campfires to teach lessons of love and sacrifice. But now, Marla realized, those stories were more than just myth. They were a lifeline, a desperate, untested, and uncertain lifeline for her people. As the ship approached Earth, Marla's mind raced, her thoughts tangled in a web of confusion and fear. The stakes were unimaginable. The royal family had always been revered in Zygra for their purity, their dedication to the well-being of their people. She had been groomed to marry another Zygra prince, someone who would share in the responsibility of leading their people. But now she was faced with a choice that would affect not only her life but the future of an entire planet. And there was no guarantee that the strange union would even work. The process, the biological exchange, had never been tried before. She had heard of humans from Earth, she had studied them in the palace's vast library, seen images of their cultures and traditions, but they were so different from her own people. Their biology, their customs, everything about them was foreign to her. It was difficult to imagine how any of it could translate into something meaningful enough to save Zygra. The only thing she knew for certain was that the disease would keep spreading unless she did her part, unless she found a human male, took a leap of faith, and hoped that the biological connection would trigger the necessary immunity. She swallowed hard, gripping the metal rail in front of her as she tried to steady herself. She would do this. She had to. For her people. For the future of Zygra. But there were so many questions she didn't have the answers to. How could she find a man on Earth? Would he accept her? Would they even be able to communicate effectively, given the vast differences in their species? More importantly, would he be willing to sacrifice so much for the sake of a race of aliens he had never met and could hardly comprehend? And even if everything went according to plan, how would they know if it worked? What would happen to her? Would she return to Zygra with a new understanding of her place in the universe? Would she be forever changed, bound to a strange earthling and a world she had never known? The questions continued to mount in her mind, but the ship was too close to Earth now. There was no turning back. She had left Zygra with the expectation that this mission would be difficult, but she hadn't understood the weight of the decision until now, standing at the edge of the unknown. "Princess Marla," a voice called from the doorway behind her, pulling her from her thoughts. She turned quickly to find her chief advisor, an elderly Zygra scholar named Theriel, standing in the entrance. His once sharp features were now softened by age, his face lined with years of service to the royal family. He was a trusted confidant, one of the few who had been on this journey with her, and he had known from the beginning what the mission entailed. "We are nearing Earth's atmosphere," he said, his tone grave but comforting. Marla nodded, her eyes briefly catching his. "I know, Theriel," she said softly. Her voice trembled despite her best efforts to remain composed. "It's just, everything feels so uncertain. We have no idea if this will work. What if it doesn't?" Theriel stepped closer, his weathered hands resting lightly on the railing next to hers. "No one knows, Your Highness," he said gently, his voice filled with quiet wisdom. "But what I do know is that you have the strength to make it work. Zygra has always been a place of hope, and that hope now rests in your hands." She turned her gaze back toward the stars, the weight of the universe pressing down on her shoulders. Earth was an unknown, a mystery that she would have to navigate alone. She had never wanted this burden, but in the end, it was her responsibility. It had to be. "I'll do it," Marla said, her voice firm, her resolve hardening with each word. "I'll do whatever it takes to save Zygra." Theriel bowed his head in respect. "I know you will, Princess. We all believe in you." He paused for a moment, as if choosing his next words carefully. "It's not just your people who depend on you now, though. You're not alone in this. You'll find him. And when you do, you'll know." Marla looked at him, confusion clouding her expression. "I don't understand," she said, her voice low. Theriel met her gaze with a knowing look in his eyes, a slight smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "You'll understand when the time comes, Princess. You won't have to go through this alone. Trust in yourself and in what the universe has in store for you." The ship's engine thrummed, and Marla felt the hum of the transition into Earth's orbit. With one final glance toward the endless stars, she took a deep breath and steadied herself. There was no going back now. Zygra's fate and her own was about to change forever. Chapter 2. The Human. Adeline stood at the edge of the research lab, staring at the screen that displayed the data she had been working on for hours. She was tired, exhausted. Really, but there was something in her gut that told her she couldn't stop yet. There was a solution to the problem she was studying, something she knew deep down was waiting for her to find. Adeline had always been good with puzzles, whether they were complex equations or the mysterious, ancient artifacts she sometimes found in the dusty corners of her university's research room. But this was different. The project she had been given was unlike anything she had worked on before. It started innocently enough, a simple request to analyze the structure of a strange signal emanating from deep space. They had tracked it for months, and while it wasn't exactly unprecedented, the strength and consistency of the signal were unusual. Something was out there, something powerful. What Adeline didn't know, and what only a few select people were aware of, was that the signal wasn't just an ordinary cosmic anomaly, it was a message, and it was for her. As her fingers flew over the keyboard, a sudden, chilling realization swept over her. She had spent years working on projects related to alien life, always hoping to uncover a breakthrough, a sign of contact from another world. But she had never expected it to happen like this. The message wasn't just a signal, it was an invitation. The room around her seemed to pulse with energy as the screen blinked, revealing the words. Simple, yet profound, "You are the one. Prepare." Her breath caught in her throat. There was no mistaking it now. This wasn't just another scientific mystery to solve. This was something real, something alive, something that was waiting for her. And it was about to change everything. Adeline stood frozen in front of the computer screen, her fingers hovering above the keyboard as the words flashed before her eyes. "You are the one. Prepare." It seemed impossible, surreal even. But there it was, in black and white on her monitor. Her mind raced, trying to comprehend what was happening, trying to make sense of the message that had come from the stars. She had spent years studying extraterrestrial life, deciphering signals and patterns, hoping for a breakthrough. But this was beyond anything she had imagined. This was not just data or noise from space. This was deliberate. This was a call. She leaned forward, her pulse quickening as she scanned the rest of the message. There were no further words, no explanations. Just that one cryptic sentence. You are the one. Who was it from? Why was it directed at her? And most importantly, what did she have to prepare for? Adeline felt her hands shake slightly as she pulled up the encryption code that had originally protected the message, hoping to uncover more details. As she worked through the decryption, she realized that the message wasn't just meant for anyone. It was meant for her. She didn't know how she knew this, but everything about the way the message had appeared, its timing, its precision seemed to align with her own life. The puzzle pieces were falling into place, but the bigger picture remained a mystery. And mysteries were something Adeline thrived on solving. The message had been sent via a signal deep within the cosmic web, a place far from Earth's ordinary communication channels. This was not a simple email or a misplaced transmission from some lost satellite. This was something monumental, something ancient, and yet somehow personal. As she worked through the final stages of decryption, a strange thought crossed her mind, a thought that both excited and terrified her at the same time. The message was coming from an alien race. But what if it wasn't just a message? What if the one referred to her for a reason because she was a necessary part of something larger, something beyond just this signal? Adeline ran her fingers through her hair, pushing her growing anxiety aside. She wasn't sure what to think anymore. All she knew was that she had to find the answers. This message, this invitation had set something in motion, and she had no choice but to follow it, wherever it led. As the decryption completed, the screen displayed an address coordinates in deep space, light years away from Earth. But there was more. A new piece of data appeared, a symbol that was unlike anything she had seen before. It was simple in shape, almost abstract, but it carried weight. It was clear, unmistakable. It was a map, a location. The coordinates matched, pinpointing a planet she had never heard of before, located in the farthest reaches of space, at the edge of the galaxy. There was no mistake. This was a real place, and it was calling her. Her heart raced with excitement and fear. She could feel the weight of the moment settling in her chest. She had always dreamt of space, of otherworldly adventures, but now, as reality hit her, she realized this wasn't some academic curiosity or theoretical exploration. This was real. This was a journey that could change everything. Taking a deep breath, Adeline knew that the moment she set foot on this journey, she would be leaving everything behind. Her life at the university, the familiar world she had known, would become a distant memory. She couldn't just go on with her research. The message wasn't just a scientific anomaly, it was a call to action, and she had to respond. But there was still one more thing that unsettled her. The message had been clear in its directive: prepare. Prepare for what? The unknown? What kind of danger lay ahead? The alien race behind this message must have known something about her, or about humanity, that no one else did. The idea that she was the one made her wonder if she was being asked to play a role she wasn't ready for. What did they want from her? Adeline sat in her chair, staring at the screen, her mind filled with questions, doubts, and a strange feeling of destiny. It was like nothing she had ever felt before, like the universe was shifting around her, and she was being pulled into something far greater than herself. And yet, a part of her knew that there was no turning back now. She had always dreamed of something more. Now she had to find out what that something was. The next step was clear. She had to go. But first, she had to figure out how to make the journey. The coordinates were far away, deep in the galaxy, in a region that was almost impossible to reach with conventional spacecraft. But she had the resources, years of research, advanced technology, and enough knowledge of alien artifacts and space travel to make it work. Her heart pounded in her chest as she typed the coordinates into her computer, pulling up every piece of information she could find on the mysterious location. She wasn't just going to sit here and wonder what it all meant. She was going to go there, to the heart of the unknown, and find out what awaited her. The faint sound of footsteps behind her startled her out of her reverie. She turned quickly to see her colleague, Dr. Jacob Green, walking toward her. He was a fellow researcher, someone she had worked with on a number of projects, but someone who didn't share her enthusiasm for the unknown. He was practical, grounded in reality, and very much a skeptic when it came to anything beyond the scientific consensus. "Adeline, what are you working on?" Jacob asked, his voice tinged with curiosity as he approached her desk. He glanced at the screen, his brow furrowing as he noticed the coordinates and symbols that were flashing across the display. She hesitated for a moment, unsure of how much to reveal. "It's a message," she said cautiously, choosing her words carefully. "An alien message. From a race we've never encountered before." Jacob raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued but skeptical. "An alien message? Come on, Adeline. You know how many hoaxes and wild theories there are out there. Are you sure this isn't just some interference? A miscalculation?" Adeline shook her head, her voice steady with conviction. "No, this is real, Jacob. I've decoded it. The message is for me. It's an invitation." Jacob stared at her, his skepticism slowly giving way to curiosity. "An invitation? For what?" She took a deep breath, glancing at the screen again before meeting his gaze. "I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out. I have to go there. I have to see what's waiting for me." Jacob's expression shifted, a mixture of concern and disbelief flickering across his face. "Adeline, you're talking about leaving everything behind. A journey into unknown space, to a place no one's ever been. You can't just dash." "I can and I will," she interrupted softly. Her decision had been made. The invitation was not just a call to explore, it was a call to action. And Adeline wasn't the kind of person who could ignore that. Jacob fell silent for a moment, clearly processing her words. Finally, he sighed, a reluctant acceptance in his gaze. "I don't know what's out there, Adeline, but if you're going, I'll help. You're not alone in this." Adeline nodded, grateful for his support, but she knew this journey would be hers alone. The rest of the world, her colleagues, her research, everything she had known would fade into the background. What lay ahead was the great unknown, a journey that would take her far beyond the boundaries of Earth, far beyond anything she could have ever imagined. The screen flickered, displaying the coordinates once more, and for the first time, Adeline felt the weight of the universe in her hands. She wasn't just solving a puzzle anymore. She was about to walk into the future of humanity and of Zygra, where the very fabric of existence would be rewritten. And with that, the journey began. Chapter 3. The journey begins. The days that followed were a whirlwind of preparation, each moment filled with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. Adeline had made up her mind she was going. There was no turning back now. She'd spent years studying the stars, decoding ancient signals, and dreaming of what lay beyond the Earth. But this was more than just research. It was a calling, a pull deep in her chest that she couldn't ignore. The message had chosen her, and now she had to answer it. With Jacob's help, they began working tirelessly to gather the necessary resources for the journey. They would need more than just a standard spaceship to reach the distant coordinates. They would need a craft capable of traversing uncharted territories at unimaginable speeds. Thankfully, Adeline's position as a leading researcher at the Galactic Institute allowed her access to the best equipment available, and with her unparalleled knowledge of advanced technology and alien artifacts, she was able to modify the ship to meet their needs. It was an old prototype, meant for deep space exploration, but never fully completed, an experimental craft designed to handle extreme conditions, capable of warping through hyperspace at a fraction of light speed. It was the only one of its kind, and it had sat dormant for years, gathering dust in the Institute's storage bays. Now, it would serve as their lifeline. The crew was small, just her and Jacob. The journey was too risky, too uncertain, to involve anyone else. She knew it would take weeks to reach the coordinates, but what lay ahead was even more uncertain. She wasn't sure how the alien message would translate into reality or what the destination held. But there was no turning back. As the ship was prepped for departure, Adeline stood on the observation deck of the Institute's launch bay, her fingers lightly pressed against the cold glass of the window. The ship, sleek and silver, sat beneath the bay's lights, casting long shadows as it stood ready for takeoff. In the distance, the stars twinkled as if beckoning her toward them. Everything felt so far away, as though she were standing on the edge of some great precipice, looking into the unknown. There was no fear, only a sharp, clear sense of purpose. This was it. This was what she had been preparing for, whether she realized it or not. She had always felt a sense of being on the outside, looking in, but now, as she prepared to embark on a journey that no one on Earth had ever taken, She felt for the first time like she was truly stepping into her destiny. Jacob approached, his footsteps quiet behind her. "Everything's set," he said, his voice low, yet carrying the hint of excitement that matched Adeline's own. He wasn't as sure about the journey as she was. His skepticism had slowly been replaced with cautious optimism as the reality of what they were doing sank in. "We're good to go." Adeline turned to face him, offering him a reassuring smile. He was the only person she could trust completely. They had been through countless hours of research together, often bouncing ideas off one another, arguing over theories, and dreaming of what lay beyond the stars. But now, this was more than just another research project. This was a leap into the unknown, and while Jacob wasn't as fully committed as she was, he understood the gravity of what was at stake. Zygra was out there, waiting for her, and the human part of this equation, one she had yet to meet, was the key to it all. "Then let's do this," Adeline said, her voice steady as she walked toward the ship's hatch, feeling the coolness of the metal beneath her hand. There was no room for second-guessing now. The countdown had begun. As she climbed aboard the ship, Jacob following behind her, she took her seat in the pilot's chair, fingers already flying over the control panel. The hum of the engines began to grow louder as the systems powered up, a soft vibration underfoot as the ship prepared for liftoff. Adeline felt her heart beat faster, the gravity of the situation starting to sink in. She was about to break through the atmosphere, to leave behind everything she knew, and head toward an alien world. Toward a future that was both terrifying and exhilarating. Jacob sat beside her in the co-pilot's seat, his hands hovering nervously over the controls. "Ready when you are," he said, trying to sound confident, but failing to mask the tension in his voice. He was not the adventurous type, he was more the cautious, measured scientist who always played it safe. But now, as they prepared to embark on this unprecedented journey, even he couldn't help but feel the thrill of what they were about to do. Adeline nodded, her eyes scanning the data on the screen. All systems were functioning. The course was set. There was no going back now. She took a deep breath and activated the engines. The ship shot upward, breaking through the atmosphere and into the cold vacuum of space. For a moment, there was nothing but the quiet hum of the engines and the faint sound of Jacob's voice, asking questions she didn't quite hear. She was too focused on the stars outside the window. The ship surged forward, leaving Earth's gravity behind, and she could feel the weight of the journey ahead. She wasn't just traveling to another planet. She was crossing into a new chapter of existence, one where the answers to all her questions lay beyond the farthest reaches of the universe. But it wasn't just knowledge she sought. It was connection. She had always known that something was missing from her life, some piece that she couldn't quite grasp, no matter how many books she read or how many lectures she attended. Now, she knew what it was. The journey would take time, weeks, even months, and during that time, Adeline knew there would be moments of doubt. There would be times when the silence of space would feel oppressive, when the weight of her mission would become almost unbearable. But as she looked out at the vastness of space, at the swirling galaxies and the distant stars, she couldn't help but feel a profound sense of purpose. This was her moment. She had been chosen for something far greater than herself, something that would impact not only her life but the future of an entire species. She wasn't just a researcher anymore. She was an emissary and ambassador between two worlds, and her path was leading her to a man she had never met, on a world she had never seen, to fulfill a purpose she couldn't yet understand. The journey was long. The days and nights blurred together in the endless void of space as the ship moved closer to its destination. The crew, Adeline and Jacob, settled into a routine. Their conversations ranged from science to philosophy, from the mundane to the profound, but in between the small talk, there was an unspoken understanding that something monumental was unfolding before them. They had no idea what awaited them at their destination, but they knew it would be life-changing. Adeline spent hours poring over the data she had collected, analyzing the message again and again, trying to piece together the clues and unlock its meaning. She had no answers yet, but she was driven by an undeniable sense that the truth was out there, waiting for her to discover it. There were moments when she would catch Jacob staring out of the window, lost in thought, as if he too could feel the enormity of the task before them. He hadn't said much about the destination, but she knew he was grappling with the same questions she had been asking herself since the message arrived. What would happen when they reached the coordinates? Would they find the alien race that had sent the message? Would the disease that plagued Zygra be cured? And, perhaps most pressing of all, would the connection between her and the human that awaited them be enough to save an entire species? As the ship continued its journey through the stars, Adeline couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them, waiting for them to arrive. It was as though the universe itself had a plan for her, one she could not yet comprehend. But the closer they got to their destination, the more certain she became of one thing. The answer to the mystery of her life and of Zygra was out there, waiting. The hum of the ship's engines grew louder as they entered a new phase of their journey. They were nearing their destination, and the tension in the air was palpable. Adeline and Jacob sat in silence, each of them consumed by their own thoughts. The stars outside the window shimmered, their light reflecting off the ship's surface like distant promises. They were close now, so close. The unknown awaited them, and with it, the future. As the days passed, the reality of their mission settled in even deeper. The ship hummed through the void, the isolation of space pressing down on Adeline and Jacob. Though they were only two people aboard a craft designed for intergalactic travel, the vastness of the cosmos made them feel impossibly small. The rhythm of their days began to align with the slow, measured pace of the journey, and their conversations drifted between subjects, always returning to the unknown destination ahead. Adeline couldn't help but feel the weight of the mission bearing down on her. What awaited them when they arrived? What were they really going to find at the coordinates that had been provided in the mysterious alien message? The cryptic words on the screen echoed in her mind every day, and they began to haunt her. You are the one. Prepare. Prepare for what? What exactly had she been chosen for? She had read the message 1,000 times, overanalyzing each word, each phrase, searching for answers. And yet, the truth seemed to remain just beyond her reach, a flickering light she couldn't quite grasp. There were too many unknowns, too many variables. As the ship continued on its trajectory toward the unknown, the isolation began to feel both comforting and suffocating at the same time. They were far from Earth now, far from any familiar world. The stars outside the ship's windows were distant, unreachable, and Adeline found herself constantly gazing at them, as though they might hold the answers to the questions swirling in her mind. At times, the stillness of space felt peaceful, almost calming, but there were moments when the silence was too much to bear, too overwhelming. Jacob, ever the practical one, spent most of his time reviewing the ship's systems, making adjustments where necessary, but even he could feel the growing tension. Though he had agreed to join Adeline on this journey, he wasn't fully convinced of its importance. He didn't share the same sense of urgency that she did. To him, this was just another academic exercise, albeit a dangerous one, but to Adeline, it was everything. Her life had led her to this point. Her future was no longer in the lab, studying theories and abstract concepts. It was in the stars, among alien civilizations. A place where real change could happen if only she could unlock the mystery that had brought her here. A week into the journey, they hit their first hurdle. The ship's navigation system began to malfunction, throwing them off course by several degrees. The stars outside the window seemed to shift slightly, and Adeline's stomach dropped as she realized they were veering dangerously close to an uncharted asteroid field. The data from their initial trajectory calculations had been off, and the adjustments needed to correct the course were critical. Jacob, the NAV's off, Adeline said, her voice tense as she frantically checked the diagnostics. We're headed straight for an asteroid field. If we don't recalibrate soon, we'll be in serious trouble. Jacob rushed to the console, his brow furrowed in concentration. His fingers moved rapidly over the touch panel as he pulled up the system data. I see it. We're losing stability. This old model wasn't made for the kind of precision we need. We'll need to correct the ship's path manually, but we'll need to engage the emergency thrusters. Get ready. Adeline nodded, her heart pounding as she braced herself. The ship rattled slightly as Jacob engaged the emergency systems, and the vibration grew more intense as they fought to reorient the ship and avoid the asteroid field. Adeline could feel the weight of the ship shifting, the pull of gravity beginning to feel like a distant memory. Everything in the ship seemed to tilt, as though they were falling sideways in the void of space, and for a moment, it felt as though time had stopped. Then, the ship stabilized, the shaking subsiding as Jacob regained control. That should do it, he said, his voice calm but with an edge of relief. "We're back on course. But we're going to need to make some serious adjustments to the NAV system once we reach our destination. This isn't going to cut it for long." Adeline exhaled slowly, her hands still trembling slightly as she gripped the console. She looked out the window again, the stars now appearing steady, as though mocking her unease. She had to remind herself that this wasn't just about the journey, it was about the destination. She had come so far, and she wasn't going to let a small malfunction throw everything off track. "Thanks, Jacob," she said, her voice steadier now. "I'll handle the rest. You focus on the systems. Let's make sure we're ready for whatever comes next." Jacob gave her a tight nod, turning back to his work as Adeline once again found her gaze drifting toward the stars. They had made it through the first test of the journey, but she knew that more challenges lay ahead. The further they traveled into the unknown, the more unpredictable everything would become. The message that had beckoned her here was still a mystery, and the potential for what she might find was both exhilarating and terrifying. As they continued on their way, Adeline couldn't help but wonder what they would discover when they finally arrived at their destination. She had prepared herself for the worst, for the possibility that they might not find anything at all. But deep down, a flicker of hope kept her moving forward, urging her to believe that there was something worth finding, something that would change everything. Days passed as the ship continued its journey, the void of space becoming a familiar backdrop to their daily routines. Adeline's thoughts constantly returned to the message, to the alien civilization that had sent it, to the mysterious human that would play such a crucial role in saving the Zygra people. She had never met him, didn't even know his name, but somehow she felt an undeniable connection to him. This strange human, whose genetics were key to everything that had brought her here, was the answer to Zygra's future. Her thoughts were interrupted one evening when the ship's communication system beeped, indicating a message incoming. Adeline glanced at the console, surprised. She hadn't expected to receive anything. No transmissions had been detected along their route. Her fingers hovered over the controls as she accepted the communication, her heart racing with anticipation. The screen flickered, and for a moment, the image was distorted. Then, slowly, a figure appeared on the screen. The image was hazy at first, but as the signal stabilized, she saw him, a man, his features still blurry, but there was no mistaking it. He was human, his dark eyes fixed on her. "Princess Marla of Zygra," his voice crackled, but the tone was clear, urgent. "I know who you are, and I've been waiting for you. I am the one you seek, and the time has come. Prepare yourself. The future of your people depends on you." Chapter 4. The Final Steps. Adeline stared at the screen, her mind racing. The voice. The figure. It was him, the human she had been searching for, the one she had been summoned to meet, to join with in a union that would save her people. She had expected to find him, but the reality of the moment left her breathless. He was here, in front of her, even though he was still miles away, and somehow she felt a strange recognition, a connection she couldn't quite explain. She could feel the urgency in his voice, the weight of his words as they settled on her heart like a heavy stone. Her fingers trembled as she pressed the communication button. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice steady despite the tumultuous wave of emotions crashing over her. "Why did you contact me? How do you know who I am?" The man's face softened as he seemed to adjust, moving closer to the camera. His voice was calm, but there was an underlying tension. "I know you're on your way. I've known for some time, and I've been preparing, waiting for you, just as you've been waiting for me. We are connected, Marla. Whether you understand it or not, your journey and mine are tied together. You came here for one reason, and I'm here to fulfill that role. The future of Zygra and Earth depends on what happens between us. You've come to me not just for your people's survival, but for your own transformation." Adeline's pulse quickened. The weight of his words settled in like a physical presence, one she couldn't shake. This wasn't just about saving Zygra anymore. This was about a union that transcended simple biology. The power between them, what was it? What did it mean? "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice quiet. "What role do I play in this? What are we about to do?" He looked directly into the camera, his gaze unwavering. "What we do next will change the fate of our worlds. You need me to save your people, but in return, I need you too. Together, We will forge a bond that will grant us both the power we need to heal Zygra. The union between us is not just a biological one. It's something more. We'll awaken the forces that have always been there, waiting to be used. The words, his presence, everything about this moment seemed so surreal, and yet it felt as if destiny had been waiting for them both. And now, they were about to embark on something that would alter the course of history. Adeline's heart pounded, and for the first time in her life, she felt the full weight of her responsibility and the power that would soon be hers. The future was in their hands. Adeline sat frozen, her mind struggling to catch up with the magnitude of what had just been revealed. The man on the screen, this human, the one she had been sent across the stars to find, was no longer just a name or a distant theory. He was real. He was alive. And he held the key to Zygra's salvation, as well as the key to something far more profound, far more dangerous than she had ever imagined. Her eyes were locked on the screen, on the human face that had appeared before her. His features were softer than she had expected, his dark hair slightly tousled, his eyes intense. Yet there was a calmness in his expression that made her feel oddly reassured, as if, somehow, everything would be okay. Despite the distance between them, despite the uncertainty of what lay ahead, she couldn't help but feel that strange pull, the same sense of connection she had felt the first moment she had heard his voice. Something deep within her seemed to recognize him, as though their fates had been intertwined long before they ever met. The human leaned forward slightly, his voice lowering with a quiet intensity. "I know this is overwhelming, Marla," he said, his eyes never leaving hers. "But this isn't just about survival. This is about more than just the physical bond between us. There's an energy between us, something ancient. We've both been chosen to restore balance both to your world and to mine. The bond we share will be the catalyst that awakens the power needed to save Zygra. And the future of Earth will change too, in ways we can't predict." Her heart pounded as the weight of his words sank in. It was true, Zygra's future rested on the fulfillment of this strange union. But now she was hearing that it was about more than just her people. Earth was tied to this as well. She felt the enormity of the responsibility on her shoulders, like a stone that threatened to crush her. How could one simple act, an act she had been raised to believe was a form of sacrifice, a duty, carry so much weight? How could their connection, this bond, change the very fabric of two worlds? "I don't understand," she whispered, her voice barely audible, though the words hung heavily in the air. "You say it's more than biology, but what is it really? What happens after we complete the union?" The man on the screen hesitated for a moment, then sighed, as if choosing his words carefully. "The union will awaken the dormant powers inside both of us. Your royal bloodline and my human genetics were always meant to cross. There's something ancient at play here, Marla, something we don't yet fully understand. But I know this. The moment we come together, it will set something in motion that will heal Zygra's sickness. But it will also open up doors to greater understanding. The diseases that ravage your world will be wiped away, but what will take its place will be something different. You'll gain new knowledge, new power, and together, we'll awaken a force that has been waiting for eons." Adeline's thoughts whirled. She had known that what lay ahead would be difficult, but she hadn't anticipated the magnitude of the decision. It wasn't just about saving her people anymore, it was about becoming a part of something much larger, something cosmic. The universe itself seemed to be pulling them together, guiding them toward this union, as if it had been written in the stars long before their birth. As the weight of the moment descended upon her, Adeline could feel the warmth of the ship's cabin and the coolness of the stars outside pressing in on her. She could sense Jacob's eyes on her, though she had not turned to look at him. She could feel his presence, his quiet skepticism, still lingering. He didn't understand the importance of this. He didn't understand the depth of what she was about to do. But it didn't matter. This wasn't about him. It was about the future. Her future. Zygra's future. The future of two worlds. Turning back to the screen, Adeline nodded slowly. "What do I need to do?" she asked, her voice steady, though her heart beat faster in her chest. The man on the screen smiled, though there was a deep sadness in his eyes. "Come to me, Marla. Come to Earth. Only then will we begin the process. The moment you set foot here, everything will fall into place. And when we're together, the bond will be complete. There's no turning back, but in that moment, you will know. The answers will come. The transmission cut off as abruptly as it had begun, leaving Adeline with a quiet, lingering emptiness. The silence in the room stretched out, thick with expectation and uncertainty. She could feel the pull in her chest, a magnetic force that seemed to call her toward Earth, toward the man who had just revealed himself to her. The weight of his words, of the destiny they now shared, pressed down on her like a heavy cloak. Jacob turned to her, his face serious. "You're going to Earth, then?" Adeline nodded, her eyes never leaving the now empty screen. "I have to. We have to. Zygra needs me. We can't afford to wait." Jacob's expression softened, his initial skepticism giving way to quiet understanding. "I know you think this is the right thing to do, but—" He paused, struggling to find the words. "This is dangerous, Adeline. You don't even know what this will mean for you, for us. You're talking about an ancient force, a bond with a human we don't understand. You might not come back the same." Adeline turned to face him fully now, her eyes meeting his. "I don't have a choice. My people don't have a choice. And neither do I." Jacob nodded, his face resigned. But there was something more in his gaze, something that reflected both fear and admiration. "Then I'm with you. You're not going through this alone." She smiled at him, a fleeting, bittersweet smile. "Thank you, Jacob." With that, she stood, the decision final. The ship was already on course for Earth. There was no turning back now. The path she had been given was one that would reshape her life, her people, and the future of two worlds. The unknown loomed ahead, as vast and uncharted as the galaxy itself, but for the first time, she felt ready to face it. The journey to Earth was long, but as the days passed and the stars streaked past the ship's windows, Adeline couldn't help but wonder what she would find. Would the human she sought be all that the message had promised? Would their bond truly heal Zygra, as the ancient prophecy had foretold? And when the time came, when they stood together, what kind of power would they unleash? There was no way to know, not yet. But one thing was certain, the future had already begun. As the ship neared Earth's orbit, Adeline prepared herself for the next step of this incredible journey. The unknown awaited her, and she was ready to face whatever came next. Her destiny was waiting.